part of the recent slump that we've seen in the NSC was due to some jitters and anxieties about what this ICC report would contain. That report has now been released, and it contains 6 names of very powerful Kenyans. How have the markets reacted?
The markets have been very well behaved, quite orderly. On the day of the announcement, they extended trading hours for about an hour and 40 minutes. And we've moved around about 5 or 10 points. The market had already fallen about 10% from its 2010 high ahead of that announcement. So I think quite a bit of the news was already priced in. The shilling, Lorata, tends to be a very good barometer of political risk, and that stayed pretty well behaved at around 80.50, 80.60. I think the high beta proxy at the moment for the Kenyan markets is probably the Kenya Power rights issue, which is still open and set to close this month. And I think that's where you might see some pressure show itself.
Okay, going back to this report, I think the most sensational aspect was the naming of the finance minister, who's also the deputy prime minister, Uhuru Kenyatta. Why is his name in particular seen as posing the greatest challenge to the stability of this coalition government?
Well, I think obviously the finance ministry is an absolutely central ministry in any government, as it is in this one. There was a sense that Uhuru Kenyatta was probably the anointed heir of the president, but that anointment, there were issues around it. But also bear in mind that the 3 members from the PNU, the president's side of the government, who have been issued with these summons are, was the previous head of police, the Minister of Finance, and the Cabinet Secretary. You don't get much closer to the president than you do with those 3.
Okay, there's also the presence of names like William Ruto, and he's aligned to the other side of the coalition, the Orange Democratic Movement, led by the Prime Minister. With both sides now at risk and the credibility of politicians in both sides of this alliance, are we going to see a major fallout in this coalition government?
Well, it's interesting. I don't think it's been very even-handed, actually, on both sides. The Prime Minister had already fallen out with William Ruto. They could barely tolerate each other, and that's been the case for well over 6 months. So I think he's well shot of him in a way. So, and also then if you look at the other 2 candidates, Henry Koskei's industrialization minister and this journalist, you'd have to say that in many regards the Prime Minister has found the field cleared of his opponents for the 2012 election. And in that way, if you look at it that way, I think he's come out so far ahead. With regard to how the government now deals with the situation, I think, we have a process here. I think investors will prefer, these 6 folks to be funneled into the process and to see what comes out at the end of the process. Risks remain if there is friction ahead of that funneling. And that I can't really tell now. It's a little bit of a known unknown.
Let's talk about investor sentiment on the back of this report. It depends on which side of the spectrum you sit. Some say that it will really pose a challenge for the integrity of the Grand Coalition. Others say it's going to reinforce the idea that Kenya has changed, that the era of impunity has ended. For investors, what do you think this ICC report means?
I think in the medium term, it's an incredibly cathartic and positive event, following on a sequence of positive events we've seen this year with the passing of the new constitution and a number of other events which have been progressive. And I think this might well be the cathartic event where the country feels that, there is justice and there are consequences for people's actions, which there have not been. If you go back in Kenyan history, 1992, 1997, and the previous election, there's been a sequence of these problems where no one has ever been punished. And I think for the first time we've got a process. And I think if you look at the ratings, 85% of the country is behind this process.
Okay, and finally, Aly Khan, analysts are quite bullish about Kenyan growth going forward. You've had the best performing bourse largely for 2010 with returns of 33%, growth forecast at 5% to 6%, a new investor-friendly constitution. Do you think that all of these will be very realistic projections for Kenya in the midst of some of these political uncertainties?
But politics, unfortunately, has always taken a very big bite out of our economy. If you correlate politics to the economy, it's been a near 100% correlation. But having said that, we're once again taxing on the runway. We're going to grow at 5%, as you said. We'll probably accelerate to 6%, all things being equal. And we once again have a chance to take off. I do admit that right now, a lot depends on how the politics plays out. And for me, as yet, it remains a very fluid tape. And we've got to keep a close eye on it. But on balance, there are lots of positives in this region.